Hey, what's up, Speedy's Garage gang? Welcome back to the Speedy's Garage YouTube channel. Today I'm going to answer a question I've been getting asked quite a bit about Go Man Go here. And we're going to get into a little side project. It's a rainy, gloomy day here in Middle Tennessee, so it was a good day to be in the shop messing around. So let's get after it. And to get started, we're going to talk a little bit about the Supercharger design on Go Man Go here. And as you may or may not know, the air basically comes up and over and goes through these bricks. There's one on each side, and there's a coolant reservoir specifically for the Supercharger back here, and it cycles coolant that is separate from the engine. It's the same coolant, but separate from the engine's coolant. And it cycles it through, it's called a heat exchanger, and you can't really see it, but it's up here in front of the radiator. And it's very similar or the same as an actual radiator. It cycles that coolant through the heat exchanger, cools it down, it goes back into the Supercharger in the back, and it comes up and flows through these bricks. And so the idea is that coolant flows through the bricks. They look like mesh kind of metal pieces. I'll try to find a picture and put it in here. If I can't find one, forgive me, but I'll try to put a picture in here so you can see it. And when that coolant flows through the air blows over those metal pieces that have coolant in them. They pull heat out of the air and make a cooler charge that goes into the engine, which is a good thing. That's what you want. So that's how the Supercharger on Go Man Go works. All right, now we're going to compare that to Old Faithful over here, otherwise known as Project Sport Runner. And what you'll notice about its Supercharger is there is no brick. So it compresses the air and it goes straight into the engine. And what that means is there's nothing to cool it down. So you have to be a little more careful with what size pulley you run. You have to be a little more aware of where the fueling comes in. And on this one, we've actually got what's called, if I can remember where it is, 7th injector. Hopefully you can see that back there. And there's a little piggyback computer. And as boost climbs, the little piggyback computer tells that injector to spray a little bit of fuel that supplements the injectors that are already in the engine. So that's a 7th injector. It only comes on under certain boost conditions over about, let's call it 7 or 8 PSI. I have it start to spray just a little bit kind of as a safety net. So this one doesn't have an intercooler. It isn't as efficient, anywhere near as efficient as the one on the Hellcat. Really good Superchargers will have an intercooler installed. This one doesn't have the heat exchanger up front. The brick, by the way, is called an intercooler. The piece up front that I talked about before, heat exchanger. This doesn't have it. Good Superchargers will, however, sometimes, because of packaging, which means how it gets installed and if it'll fit under the hood and all of that, you can't have one. And I think that's what happened when Magnuson actually makes this Supercharger. They made it for TRD, Toyota Racing Development. I suspect it wouldn't fit under the hood. They couldn't find a way to do a heat exchanger, so they just did the best they could. It was only ever meant to run, 6 or 7 PSI anyway. I've got mine up to running, probably about 11 PSI. I'm gonna tell you how I did that in a minute. But because of packaging, this doesn't have a heat exchanger, so we had to do something to cool everything down. And the answer to cooling everything down so that I can safely run 11 PSI on this engine is meth injection. You can see the line come in here. The reservoir is the actual windshield washer reservoir. I'll link to the top a video I did on that a while back. It greatly improved the power and power delivery of this vehicle and allowed me to run 11 PSI safely. With the meth injection, I'm getting a cooling effect. When that fluid sprays in there and it gets drawn into the Supercharger and sprayed into the cylinders, it changes from liquid to gas, which is a phase change. And when that happens, it draws heat out as a result, number one. And number two, it's about 105, 110 octane, the way I have it mixed up. You mix methanol and water and you get water meth, where the name comes from, and it cools everything down and it works pretty good. And this truck needed it because it doesn't have the heat exchanger or any way to cool down that intake charge. There is a problem, however. And that problem, at least for me, has been these pumps. So I probably put that meth injection kit on Project Sport Runner 4 years ago, right about 4 years ago. And this is the third pump that has failed. I've replaced it again, and there's a fourth one on the truck. I already put it on there. But I'm curious why these keep failing. Now, it does sit behind the front bumper, and I'll post a picture, but it sits like this behind the front bumper right underneath the washer fluid reservoir, because that's what I'm using as the meth tank, the meth injection tank. Some kits you can get a separate tank and the pump will mount to it and you can put it in the trunk of the car or whatever. And maybe you have better luck if you do that. If you've got a system like that where you've got the pump mounted somewhere, leave me a comment and let me know. But this is not directly in the weather by any means. I mean, it probably gets a little bit of rainwater on it. You know, it sits behind the bumper, but it's not like getting sprayed on as far as I know. And this has been on there about a year, and you can see it doesn't look terribly filthy or anything. However, it failed. And the first one failed after about 2 years, and I thought, well, it's a fluke. I replaced it, and the second one failed in about 6 months, and it was replaced under warranty because I think it had a 6-month or 1-year warranty, I can't remember. And now we're on the third one that has failed, and it lasted 14 months. And so I got the fourth one on the truck now. So this third one failed. They're lasting on average about a year, and that is not acceptable. They're about 150 bucks for these pumps. So I want to disassemble this one and find out what failed on it. So we're going to do that next. But I'm going to answer the question. A lot of people ask me, should I put meth injection on my Hellcat? My answer is no. 2 reasons for that. 1, these pumps keep failing. And you definitely don't want to tune the car to rely on that meth injection pump. On the 4Runner, I've got a little safety in the tune for that 7th injector where if the boost gets way up there, a little bit of fuel starts to spray to keep things nice and safe. I'm not relying on the meth injection all by itself. Now, I will see on the air fuel ratio gauge, I'll know when the pump's not working because the air fuel won't be what I want it to be with meth spraying, but it's still in a safe range without it. So with meth, it's around 11.3, 11.5 air fuel ratio. If the meth quits working, it's around 12.0, 12.2, which isn't going to burn the motor up as long as I don't just hammer on it and hammer on it and hammer on it. So hopefully I'm paying attention, but it's a safety net. On the Hellcat, it uses wide bands, which are sensors in the exhaust, and it detects that extra fuel. So methanol is a fuel, and when your engine burns it, it creates exhaust, and the wide bands will pick that up, and they will start to dial back the fuel injectors to account for the fuel the meth system is putting into the system. I hope that makes sense. But I don't know of a way to say it's safe on a Hellcat, number 1. And number 2, it's got those heat exchangers in there already and the brick that I talked about. So I don't know that you really need it. This is something that really was done years ago, you know, probably 15, 20 years ago to keep things cool like I showed you on the 4Runner. That's why I use it there. No, I do not recommend it on a Hellcat. Hope that answers the question. I get asked all the time, and I think it's because people see it on the 4Runner and wonder why I don't have it on the Hellcat, but that's why. Now let's disassemble this pump, see if we can figure out what went wrong with it. I'm going to start by testing it on the bench with my trusty power probe. If you don't have one of these tools, I'll put a link in the description. If you work on cars or any type of motors or anything like that, you're going to want one of these. It can do a lot of different things, but one of the favorite things it can do, at least one of my favorite things, is it can apply power straight to a device like this motor. And we're going to find out, or the pump I should say. I'm going to cover up the ports just in case it sprays a little bit of fluid. It wasn't working on the vehicle, but all I'm going to do, I've grounded the one side of the wiring going into the pump, and I'm going to touch nothing. It's like it's locked up. I can hear it trying to move, but by pushing that little switch, I can actually apply 12 volts straight to this pump. We know it's locked up and not working. So I already knew it was not a wiring problem before I pulled it off the vehicle, obviously. So now we're going to go deeper inside, see if we can figure out what it is. And you may be saying, well, if you already replaced the pump, why in the world are you taking it apart? Well, number 1, I like to take things apart. When I was a kid, I took apart everything. Sometimes, probably about 80% of the time, I could put it back together. 20% of the time I couldn't, and I got in big trouble from my parents. But I enjoy taking things apart, and maybe I'll figure out what's wrong with this thing and I can actually fix it and keep it on the shelf as a spare. These are, again, about 140, 150 bucks, and in my opinion, that's too expensive for it to only last about a year. The only thing special I'm finding is I'm gonna need a T25 star bit to take part of this pump apart. I think this is called the head unit. Don't hold me to that. We're gonna start down here on the bottom, and this is gonna be where the contacts and all the electronics come in. See how they look. Should be a long bolt. Yep, goes all the way through. I see a little bit of corrosion on the end of that bolt. So that's probably what's happening. is water or moisture is getting in here. And that one's perfectly clean. That one, you can see it's got some gook on it. All right, let's see. Motor looks, or the contact rather, commutator maybe? So that's what that's called? No, that's the commutator. That's the contacts that actually allow the electricity to flow through the commutator, I believe. I'm using a bunch of technical terms about pumps that I obviously know nothing about. But these little contacts are spring loaded, and as they wear, it keeps pressure or touches the little electric windings inside the pump. So that all looks really, really good actually. No problems there at all. So that's good to see. Inside the pump looks brand new practically. It's a magnet, so it's kind of weird to take it apart. But the inside has two big magnets, one on each side. And as electricity flows through this, it starts it to spin, and then the magnetic, ooh, I see the problem. The magnetic field, I think is what you would call it, keeps it turning. Ooh, that is locked up. See that? This should spin really, really easy. A little bit of fluid coming out of it. That is locked up tight. I'm going to try to give you a better look at that. Hopefully you can see that that bearing is completely rusted. And that's a shame if that is all that's wrong with this thing. And then I guess the next question is, can I find a bearing and maybe try to repair it? We'll see. I'm going to take it the rest of the way apart and see if I can even get that bearing out of there. So at least that lets me know, I think, at least what's happening. And I noticed this on one of the other pumps that failed. It wasn't locked up tight, like this one won't even turn, but I did notice some oxidation or rust around the bottom. And I think what's happening is it's mounted on the vehicle upside down like that. And I suspect water's getting in either around these screws or this electrical connection, and it's getting down in there enough and setting right on top of that bearing, and then it's going bad. It's not the meth injection. Some people say, well, it's the methanol getting in there and eating it up. It's not. This section of the pump, which is where the motor is, and this section, which is where the pump head is, are separated by a gasket and some valves. So that is not the case. Somehow water from the atmosphere is getting in here like rainwater and causing my problem. So, oh, I picked up the screws with the magnet there. Next, we're going to try to take the pump head off and see if I can get to this bearing and get a better look at it. Is it the same? Nope, it is not the same size star bit. Let's try it. All right, so those appear to be a, what's this? 7/64 hex. That's what I'm going to use to take the pump head off, I hope. Yep, that'll work. So we'll take these out, try to show this to you. Pretty straightforward. Ooh, rust is coming out of this thing. Yeah, it's definitely corroded. There are long ones and short ones, so pay attention to where they go. On this one, the short ones go through the outside where you can see them, and the long ones go all the way in. So there's the inside of the pump head. Looks fine to me. There's the little valves, and this piece I think should just come off. Again, I'm not a pump expert. I'm literally learning this as I go, so see if I can make this come loose. So I had to get a little screwdriver and see if I can gently. All right, so there's part of the valve assembly. Again, that all looks great. Okay, so this is gonna have to come off first. So I'm gonna try to hit a little bit of a heat gun and hope it works. Things are in there. Oh, so close. I want to be careful with this in case I can rebuild it. I don't want to tear it up. But man, them things are in there. I'm probably doing this totally wrong too. It is working. I had to put a little WD-40 in there too. And use a little bit of leverage. There we go. We got one left. There. Hopefully that's still good. That looks okay, but you can start to see the rust on it. And with this removed, that housing will come off. There's a small rubber gasket. Be careful with that. And then that still looks pretty good. So it looks like our culprit's going to be this one area here. So now, I think all this sits still and this is what turns. I'm going to have to knock that out, I believe. I've set it on a couple of pieces of wood, and I'm going to try to take a punch and punch that rotor assembly out. There we go. There's our culprit. Nasty. So now the question is, can I punch these out and get replacement bearings? Because I think if I can do that, this can be fixed. There's what the rest of it looks like. It's just a, I don't know what the technical term for this is, but it's what absorbs or takes the electricity and spins and runs your pump. It's got a shaft on one end that's keyed. So that turns the deal, draws your fluid. Pretty simple little contraption if the bearings didn't rust. Impact sockets make pretty good punches, especially for bearings like this. And this one's a 14 millimeter and it looks like it'll fit just about perfect. So now I'm gonna hope we can knock this out. It's really rusted, so it may take a little bit of force. Wow. There's your problem. See how that's all nasty? We can get a new bearing. Gotta figure out what this is. It's got a part number on it. B, I think. 203Z. I'll look that up, see if we can replace that. Here's the other bearing. It sounds and feels fine. Nothing wrong with that one. And the final one that's on the electric piece, nice and smooth and quiet. So the only thing we have to replace is this guy. And again, I think what was happening is water was somehow probably dripping, coming through the top and just dripping down on this bearing, and it was upside down, so it just sat on that. And this obviously isn't meant to be, out in the weather, and it really, really rusted it. See if we can find one online. After looking at this a little bit more closely, the part number is actually 6203Z. And I looked at a picture online, and this is actually an insert, so that means we got some more banging to do. So I'm going to set it on a large, this is a 27 millimeter socket. I'm going to use a 10 millimeter. See if I can punch out this smaller. It's like there's a bearing in the bearing. It's kind of what it looks like. That sucker, it's moving, but it is really in there. 10 millimeter socket is a little bit big, so I went back and got a extension. So that looks like it's just a sleeve, actually. Yep, just a little sleeve. So I need to retain that. There's what the actual bearing looks like. Well, that's it for the disassembly. Be sure to click the link to see part 2, where we're going to try to reassemble this pump after the parts come in and hope that it works. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Be sure to check us out on Instagram. It's @Speedys_garage, as well as our website, www.speedysgarage.net. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you out there.